On August 17th, 1891, the first of what was called the People's Baths opened in New York City's lower Manhattan. The idea of the People's Baths was to offer a proper place for the people living in the city's tenements to bathe. It wasn't the first public bath in New York City, but this one was special. It offered a brand new, almost unrecognized technology called spray shower baths, thus giving the poor of New York City the opportunity to enjoy something that we take for granted today: a warm shower. But the reason that this particular amenity was being offered to the city's poor might surprise you. If you're one of those people who thinks your daily shower helps to keep you sane, well, you might be closer to the mark than you realize, because the history of the hot shower is, well, downright crazy.
Bathing is, of course, as old as humanity, and there are ancient versions of what we might call a shower. However, the mechanical shower as we know it today is different and rather new, and it came from a rather surprising source. In a time when bathing was most often done using a washing basin and a sponge, with an occasional dipping in a tub of often reused water, the mechanical shower was invented not as a luxurious way to get clean, but as a means of curing insanity. Stephanie Cox of the Auckland, New Zealand University of Technology and her co authors explain in a 2019 edition of the journal History of Psychiatry. In the early 19th century, physicians designed the first manufactured showers for the purpose of curing the insane. Sustained falls of cold water were prescribed to cool hot, inflamed brains and to instill fear, to tame impetuous wills. According to Flemish alchemist Franciscus Mercurius van Helmont, writing in his 1694 work The Spirit of Disease, or Diseases from the Spirit, the idea of using water therapy for madness came about as the fortunate result of chance in the middle of the 17th century, when a chained madman broke loose and jumped into a lake. When the man was rescued, Van Helmont wrote, he quickly recovered his spirits, which were abruptly restored to their natural order. French historian Michael Foucault explained in his 2001 work Madness and Civilization that this anecdote supposedly enlightened Van Helmont, who began to plunge the insane indiscriminately into the sea or into fresh water. Cox explains that being indiscriminate about submitting patients to this form of water torture would eventually cause Van Helmont's water treatment to fall out of favor, but the idea of using water as treatment persisted. Kate Wheeling, a staff writer at the newspaper Pacific Standard, explains in 2018. In the 18th century, insanity was thought to stem from a violent heat and inflammation in the brain. Physicians knew that cold water could calm inflammation in joints, wounds, and elsewhere in the body. So the idea was that a shock of cold water on the head might have the same effect on an inflamed brain. Identifying the cause of the insanity, inflamed vessels in the brain, was useful. As Cox explains, the practice of plunging the whole body into the water came to be seen as primitive and uninformed. The use of a mechanical shower could direct the cold water right to the head, where the problem purportedly lay. The patient was normally blindfolded. As Wheeling explains, fear, as much as the cold itself, was thought to impose order on a disordered brain. The procedure was, Foucault writes, used by Scottish physician Patrick Blair, who in a letter in 1723 described curing a man who was raving mad by binding him in a cart, stripping him of his clothes, blindfolding him, and dumping a great fall of water on him from a height of 20 feet. In 1725, Blair described in a letter to James Jurin, Secretary of the Royal Society, about curing a married woman who became mad and neglected everything, who would not own her husband nor any of her family. Blair described the treatment for the obviously insane behavior of husband neglect. I ordered her to be blindfolded. She was lifted up by force, placed and fixed to the chair in the bathing tub, which he explained put her in an unexpressible terror, especially when the water was let down. I kept her under the fall for 30 minutes, stopping the pipe now and then and inquiring whether she would take her husband, but she still obstinately denied, till at last, being much fatigued with the pressure of the water, she promised she would do what I desired. 30 minutes was apparently not enough. A week later, Blair tried again, but adding a smaller pipe so that when the one let the water fall on top of her head, the other squirted it in her face or any other part of her head or neck or breasts, I thought proper. This time he continued for 60 minutes. The third of what he called the trials was 90 minutes, which he noted amounted to 15 tons of water. Miraculously, after she had been stripped, blindfolded, and bound to a chair the fourth time, being terrified what she was to undergo, she kneeled submissively that I would spare her, and she would become a loyal, obedient, and dutiful wife. Oddly, Blair's cure was pretty much the plot of Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, but with waterboarding. Blair's model became widely accepted and was used, Cox explains, for more than a century. When a Dr. Benjamin Rush, often called the father of American psychiatry, advocated in his 1835 book Medical Inquiries and Observations upon the Diseases of the Mind, strapping a patient to a chair, applying the shower bath for 15 to 20 minutes, followed by threatening the patient with death, saying that that was effective for resistant cases. Notably, Rush had a specific room built in a wing of the Pennsylvania Insane Hospital. A space about 3 feet square was left in the flooring of the galleries, communicating with the cells on each story. The space was occupied by a strong wooden lattice or grating, divided into spaces of about 1 inch square. As these lattices were placed in an exactly perpendicular direction, one over the other, it was easy for the medical attendant to subject the patient to any degree of impression required by directing the water to be thrown from the height of 1, 2, or 3 stories. This is one of the earliest examples of a shower stall, a purpose built room in which an individual can shower. And, as Foucault explains, as every crime and every offense now carries with it a legitimate suspicion, but also as a right that may be claimed, the hypothesis of insanity, the use of therapeutic devices such as the cold shower became regular in prisons as well as asylums. Although Foucault noted there should be care taken to avoid the hard tone and shocking terms that would cause rebellion. Thus, in order to help the madman understand that the treatment was for his sake, he explained, the doctor would sometimes add a joke. If you're already a bit surprised that your morning, or as for some evening shower, was invented to terrify both lunatics and prisoners into good behavior, it shouldn't be a surprise that the procedure actually could be quite dangerous and, in fact, fatal. In his 1844 book, The Water Cure, Dr. Joel Shue noted that hydrotherapy can kill and that it may kill in the hands of the ignorant practitioner. Or, as Cox puts it, the occurrence of shower related deaths led to charges that using the cold shock shower were outdated and ignorant. An 1873 report on the International Penitentiary Congress of London labeled the cold shower a relic of barbarism. However, showers were already seeing another purpose, as Cox notes. At the same conference, a new interest in hygiene in prisons had sparked an interest in the use of showers, gasp, to clean bodies. Something that Cox explains would not only improve physical health, but also have an influence on the mental, moral, and self worth of the bather. Cox said, I'll conclude. Rather than being abandoned, however, the shower was transformed by the use of warm water to economically wash the skins of prison and asylum populations. And the shower, once only available to criminals and the insane, was moving towards the consumer market. In 1822, William Feetham of Ludgate Hill, London, patented what he simply called shower baths. Feetham's device was intended to deal with the problem of water coming with too much force. His device transferred water from a receptacle on the floor above the person by use of a hand pump. The water added to the receptacle could be heated and thus allowing a warm shower. The invention, however, had its limits, as the water from the receptacle continued to be pumped through, thus reusing the dirty water. Still, the shower bath, as a ladies' journal explained in 1855, was attainable by most persons, at any rate when at home, and is now made in various portable shapes. That is, the first showers for your residence were not made because they were a superior alternative to baths, but because they were cheap. William Paul Gerhardt wrote in his 1908 book Modern Baths and Bath Houses that the shower bath had been introduced to European military barracks in the late 1850s, and by the late 1870s, its use had been extended to such institutional settings as prisons and industrial and mining establishments. In contrast to the tub bath, the rain bath was, an early summary of its advantages observes, the simplest, quickest, cheapest, cleanest, least expensive in fitting up, that used the least space, least time in use, least amount of water, least fuel for warming water, and least cost for repairs and maintenance. That is, again, the luxury that we all enjoy today was invented not for the wealthy, but for soldiers, prisoners, and lunatics, coal miners, because it offered the least expensive way to wash. To be sure, the process improved as water heaters improved and showers were hooked up to municipal water, but that was hardly common. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, just 1% of U.S. homes had indoor plumbing at the turn of the 20th century. Which brings us to the people's baths. Andrea Renner of Columbia University explains in a 2008 edition of the Journal of the Society of Architectural Historians that in Gilded Age America, social classes were not only divided by wealth and culture, but also by smell. From the perspective of upper classes, the working class body produced a distinct and repulsive odor. This became a public issue. Aaron Blakemore notes in a 2017 edition of JSTOR Daily, clean was good, dirty was bad, and bathing became a metaphor for progressive era reform. She notes middle class families had increasing access to bathtubs and water. Meanwhile, 97% of tenement dwellers did not. Thus, the interest in public baths. As Renner notes, uncleanliness was seen as a moral failure as well as a threat to public health. New York had been providing public baths since the middle 19th century. A 2018 publication of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission explains with the goal of serving the needs of residents in a densely populated tenement district where bathing facilities were minimal or absent, the county's first public bath and laundry was erected at Mott Street by the People's Bathing and Washing Association, a philanthropic organization incorporated in 1849 by wealthy New York merchant Robert B. Minton, specifically for that purpose. A small fee was paid by some 75,000 users a year, but revenues were insufficient to keep it in operation for more than a few years. But the commission notes that in the late 1860s, the Board of Health urged New York City elected officials to assume responsibility for the establishment of public bathing facilities. The city thus established free floating saltwater public baths on the east and west shores of Manhattan. By the 1890s, the city had established 15 such floating baths, anchored at various locations along the Manhattan shoreline. And by 1896, the city recorded in excess of 5.5 million baths taken at the facilities. There was a problem, though. The waters around New York were becoming increasingly polluted. The city needed indoor public baths, an idea that fit with broader reform movements such as tenement reform. The rain or shower bath was, the Commission explains, the technology that enabled the development of an indoor public bath system for the masses. The first of these baths was opened August 17, 1891, under the auspices of the New York Association for Improving the Condition of the Poor. While touting the beauty of the building, which the New York Evening World described as light colored brick with terracotta trimmings of the early Italian style, the real difference was the 18 small bathrooms with spray shower baths, something so generally unfamiliar that the world felt the need to explain what they were. So arranged that the water flows from a circle of perforated pipes on the bather's shoulders without wetting the head. The little bath has a rubber curtain for the protection of the clothing of the bathers. The water was heated by a central boiler. Bathers paid a nickel, which covered the cost of soap and a towel, and each bather was entitled to 20 minutes in the bath. This allowed, the world explains, 500 persons to bathe each day if they like. The bath that was open that day was, the paper reported, only the first of a series of baths to be erected by the association. Although by 1901, the city opened its first free public bath at 326 Rivington Street on the Lower East Side. The Landmark Commission writes that the bath was designed by Arnold W. Brunner in the Neo Italian Renaissance style. Set in a predominantly German neighborhood, the East 11th Street bath offered 94 showers, 67 for men and 27 for women, and 7 bathtubs, 2 for men and 5 for women. These structures, Blakemore notes, were microcosms of progressivism, shuffling bathers in and out using an organized process that turned the filthy poor into uplifted city residents. But they still represented the difference between the classes, as she explains. The baths provided little space for congregating and prohibited long stays, turning the relatively new concept of a leisurely private bathing experience on its head. That decadent experience, it seems, was only for the rich. The poor, on the other hand, were handed a cake of soap and a towel and hustled into an institutional shower. That is, again, the shower we seem to find so valuable today was created not as a luxury, but as a utility. The shower was literally intended to make bathing a short institutional experience. So, how did showers come to be a public favorite, favored overwhelmingly over baths? Indoor plumbing was certainly a part of the story. As late as 1940, roughly 45% of U.S. homes still lacked a flush toilet, running water, or a bathtub. But by the early 1950s, new construction universally included indoor facilities. With various improvements, showers often combined with a tub were a regular part of the post war building boom. But baths remained more popular into the 1970s, and showers didn't overcome baths in opinion polls until the 1980s. Why? A survey in a 2019 edition of the British newspaper The Independent quoted a study of 2,000 adults commissioned by Victorian Plumbing that three-quarters of those who preferred showers said they liked them because they were faster, and more than half of the respondents said that they felt cleaner after a shower. Massachusetts contractor South Shore Dream Bath notes on their website it usually takes 9 minutes and 20 seconds at a time to shower, whereas those who bathe took about 25 minutes on average. The preference for showers suggests that more people look for a quick way to get ready or wash away the day. This might have to do with the nature of what Naomi Adiv, an assistant professor of political science at the University of Toronto, calls industrial capitalism in a 2024 edition of National Geographic. The shift came largely because, she says, the idea that you would go, hang out at the bath for the afternoon is not in keeping with worker productivity.
It's interesting that a century ago, the vast majority of the people on Earth did not have the ability to enjoy simply a hot shower because it's so common today. According to a 2024 Harris poll, 99% of American adults shower. 95% of us do so at least several times a week. And it isn't just us. The methods of data collection vary, but one thing is clear from polls around the world people all over shower. But it is ironic that this thing we tend to find as a daily joy was actually created as a means to literally terrify mental patients and criminals into better behavior. And then is the very cheapest way to clean the people that the upper class thought stank. Hopefully that won't spoil the joy you get while singing in the shower. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop, book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.